In a move no one predicted, the UK Supreme Court has just detonated a political bombshell, handing down a ruling that has triggered a chain reaction so severe it may end Keir Starmer's grip on power forever. Just 1 minute ago, a final verdict struck like lightning across the political landscape, sending shockwaves through Parliament, igniting fury online, and throwing the entire Labour Party into a full-blown crisis. What was supposed to be Starmer's triumphant path to Downing Street has suddenly become a moral battlefield. In this courtroom confrontation, tradition clashed with tyranny, the law stood against political gamesmanship, and the verdict was devastating. A scandal long kept in the shadows has exploded into daylight. Now Starmer is staring down the barrel of history, abandoned by allies, humiliated by judges, and, according to insiders, pressured to resign. This isn't just a legal loss. This is political annihilation. Britain is watching, horrified. Democracy is holding its breath. And behind the silence, a deeper truth is rising: the system is cracking, and someone must pay the price. It began quietly, like all betrayals do, a sealed case, a confidential ruling request, a challenge buried in legal jargon. But when the UK Supreme Court agreed to hear the motion against Keir Starmer's use of executive overreach to override parliamentary process, something snapped beneath the surface of British democracy. For months, questions had been whispered: was Starmer abusing legal loopholes to push through controversial legislation? Had he deliberately bypassed MPs to enforce party rule? And, most damning of all, was the Prime Minister-in-waiting behaving more like a monarch than a minister? For weeks, Starmer's office dismissed the allegations as technicalities. But behind closed doors, panic was already spreading. According to senior sources, several justices had grown increasingly alarmed at the Labour leader's pattern of conduct. The charge, undermining the constitutional balance between Parliament and the judiciary. At stake, nothing less than the future of British checks and balances. And now, it's too late to contain the fallout. Because in a stunning ruling delivered this morning, the Supreme Court has declared Starmer's maneuvers unlawful. Not questionable. Not unorthodox. Unlawful. The language of the judgment was surgical, precise, and merciless, a fundamental breach of democratic principle, a calculated circumvention of parliamentary sovereignty. These are not phrases spoken lightly in the highest court of the land. They are warnings, and they have landed like thunder inside Labour HQ. Within minutes of the announcement, government aides were seen scrambling from offices, phones ringing off the hook, internal messages leaking online showing pure disarray. This could be it: he's finished. Total collapse incoming. Social media erupted, trending #1 within 15 minutes. Prominent legal analysts called it the most consequential judicial ruling since Brexit. But it wasn't just legal circles reacting, it was the people. Piers Morgan called it a legal KO. Nigel Farage declared, justice has prevailed. Even some centre-left voices long loyal to Starmer were shaken. The ruling wasn't just a legal blow, it was a moral indictment. And yet the Prime Minister remained silent. No apology. No press conference. No statement from Number 10. Only silence. But that silence is deafening, it's the sound of political collapse unfolding in real time. As the minutes tick by, pressure is mounting. Already, 3 shadow cabinet members have reportedly offered their resignations, demanding Starmer accept responsibility and step down. The Liberal Democrats have called for an emergency general election, and inside the Conservative camp, celebration has already begun. They know what this means: Starmer, the man once seen as Labour's savior, is bleeding politically, and the wolves are circling. But behind this public drama lies something darker. According to insiders, Starmer's downfall may not be isolated. Sources suggest senior members of his legal advisory team may also face scrutiny, possibly even prosecution, for aiding in the procedural deception. If true, this scandal could widen into a full-blown political purge. The British public hasn't just witnessed a ruling, they've witnessed the ignition of a reckoning. And at the center of it all, one man stands exposed. A man who promised to restore integrity after the chaos of Johnson and the collapse of trust. A man who vowed to put the country before party. A man who now finds himself judged by the very system he swore to uphold. This is no longer a matter of party politics, it's a battle for the soul of British democracy. The courts have spoken, the people are rising, and the Prime Minister's chair has never looked more unstable. But what happens when power collapses faster than it can be transferred? Who steps in when trust is shattered? And just how far will the system go to protect its image, even if it means sacrificing its star? As the echoes of the Supreme Court ruling reverberated across Westminster, something far more sinister began to unfold behind the scenes. This wasn't just the crumbling of a political facade, it was the eruption of a hidden war, a battle that had been simmering in the shadows of British power for months. Because while the public reeled from the legal devastation, Starmer wasn't retreating. He was regrouping. And the first move came just hours after the ruling, during a secret meeting that would stun even his closest allies. Sources confirmed that Starmer held an emergency gathering with his inner circle in a secure location far from Parliament, far from Downing Street. No aides, no cameras, just a handful of loyalists huddled in crisis. What was discussed has not been officially disclosed, but leaks suggest something chilling. Starmer had no intention of resigning. In fact, he planned to fight back with everything he had. A leaked transcript, reportedly from someone present in the room, revealed his words, "They think I'm finished. I've waited too long to be pushed out by a few judges. This country needs order, not chaos. And if that means breaking a few rules to keep it together, so be it." Those words, breaking a few rules, have now become the centerpiece of a new firestorm. Because if the court's ruling wasn't enough to shake confidence in Starmer's leadership, this defiant, almost authoritarian response has done the rest. Within hours, senior members of Labour's legal team began distancing themselves, issuing vague public statements about respecting the rule of law and avoiding further constitutional strain. But it was too late. The damage was done. And then something historic happened. Something that hasn't occurred since the darkest days of the 1970s political crisis. A message was sent from Buckingham Palace to Parliament. Not public. Not ceremonial. Private, direct, and deadly serious. According to highly placed sources, King Charles has expressed deep concern over the constitutional implications of the court's decision and Starmer's response to it. Royal aides have confirmed that a high-level briefing took place at the palace late last night, attended by senior courtiers, legal advisors, and a representative from the Cabinet Office. It is now understood that the king, in a rare assertion of moral authority, is closely monitoring the situation and expects immediate steps to restore constitutional integrity. In plain language, the crown is watching, and patience is running thin. This level of royal scrutiny is unprecedented in the modern era. The monarch does not interfere in politics, until now. For the king to even suggest that something must be done is a constitutional earthquake, and it has sent terror surging through the corridors of Labour power. Suddenly, Starmer isn't just facing legal collapse, he's facing historical judgment. The monarchy, the courts, the public, even his own party. All aligned in silent outrage, all circling, all waiting for the moment to strike. But Starmer, he's not leaving quietly. Last night, under cover of darkness, his team circulated a confidential legal appeal to delay the implementation of the court's ruling. They are arguing, astonishingly, that the Supreme Court has overstepped its interpretive boundaries and that a democratic mandate should override procedural legality. In simpler terms, they are trying to frame the court's decision as anti-democratic. It's a bold, dangerous narrative, and it is already exploding across media platforms. Loyalist commentators are framing the court as an unelected elite trying to reverse the will of the people. They're trying to turn the judiciary into the villain while portraying Starmer as the embattled hero of democracy. But the public isn't buying it. Polls released just moments ago show a dramatic collapse in Labour's approval ratings. 67% of voters now believe Starmer should resign immediately. Even more shocking, over half of Labour supporters agree. And yet the leadership refuses to blink as constitutional scholars warn of a full-scale legitimacy crisis. Whispers have begun in Westminster of something not seen in generations, a cross-party coalition to force Starmer out. Yes, you heard that right. Tories, Lib Dems, even Greens, and SNP figures are talking privately about invoking an emergency vote of no confidence, not against a sitting Prime Minister, but against a Prime Minister-in-waiting whose conduct has now rendered him, in the words of one Member of Parliament, too dangerous to lead. This is uncharted territory. Britain is watching a man fall, not by election, not by scandal, but by the weight of the very constitution he tried to bend. In a stunning turn that has left the nation reeling, the United Kingdom has just witnessed one of the most explosive political moments in modern history as the Supreme Court delivered a ruling that detonated through Westminster like a thunderclap, shattering Keir Starmer's aura of control and throwing his entire political future into chaos. What began as a quiet legal challenge has evolved into a constitutional earthquake, and now, just moments after the verdict was handed down, the British political landscape is in full meltdown. Keir Starmer, once hailed as the man destined to restore order after years of turbulence, now stands on the brink of political extinction, abandoned by allies, scrutinized by the monarchy, and condemned by the very system he claimed to defend. The ruling, clear and ruthless, declared that Starmer's executive maneuvers were not merely questionable but outright unlawful, accusing him of violating the sacred balance between Parliament and the courts. The words of the judgment cut deep, a fundamental breach of democratic principle, language so severe it has not been seen since the legal wars of the Brexit era. Within minutes, social media exploded in outrage, journalists flooded Downing Street with questions, and Labour headquarters descended into panic. Reports of aides fleeing offices and urgent meetings being called spread like wildfire. Insiders whispered that resignations had already begun, while opposition leaders demanded an emergency election. Piers Morgan branded it a legal knockout, while Nigel Farage called it the day democracy fought back. But the true shock wasn't just in the legal defeat, it was in the silence that followed. Starmer vanished from public view. No statement. No apology. No sign of contrition. Just an ominous silence that left Britain holding its breath. Behind that silence, however, a darker strategy was already in motion. Hours after the ruling, Starmer reportedly convened a secret meeting with his inner circle far from Westminster, a confidential gathering that insiders now say marked the beginning of his counteroffensive. According to leaked transcripts, Starmer allegedly told his team that he would not resign, declaring, "They think I'm finished, but I've waited too long to be taken down by judges. This country needs order, and if that means breaking a few rules, so be it." Those chilling words. Breaking a few rules, ignited an even greater firestorm, framing him not as a fallen leader but as a man willing to defy the very constitution to cling to power. Legal scholars warned this was veering into dangerous authoritarian territory. Senior Labour officials began distancing themselves, issuing vague statements about respecting judicial integrity, while privately, they panicked over the fallout. Then came the unthinkable, a quiet message from Buckingham Palace to Parliament. Confidential, direct, and historically rare, the King had reportedly expressed concern over the constitutional crisis and demanded immediate restoration of order. Palace insiders revealed that senior courtiers and cabinet officials had convened late into the night, drafting what one source called a warning of moral consequence. For the monarch to even intervene behind the scenes is extraordinary, an unmistakable sign that Britain's constitutional foundation itself is at risk. This was no longer just a party crisis, it had become a question of national stability. Starmer, now cornered, reportedly moved to appeal the ruling, arguing that the Supreme Court had exceeded its power and that his actions reflected the democratic will of the people. His loyalists began spinning the narrative across sympathetic media outlets, painting him as a defender of democracy against unelected elites. But the public saw through it. Polls showed Labour's approval ratings plunging to historic lows. 67% of voters now believe Starmer should step down, including more than half of Labour's own supporters. Political analysts are calling it a free fall from which recovery may be impossible. Parliament insiders whisper of a unity pact forming. An unprecedented cross-party alliance preparing to table a vote of no confidence, not in a sitting prime minister but in a prime minister in waiting, citing his reckless disregard for constitutional order. Even within Labour, murmurs of rebellion grow louder by the hour. Some MPs have already contacted Conservative and Liberal Democrat counterparts to coordinate an exit strategy, fearing that Starmer's defiance could drag the entire party into collapse. As Westminster braces for the next phase, the mood is one of disbelief and dread. The judiciary has spoken, the monarchy has stirred, and the people have turned. Yet Starmer, once seen as the last beacon of stability, refuses to bow. It's no longer about politics, it's about survival, legacy, and the terrifying question of how far a man will go to hold power once it begins to slip away. Britain stands at a crossroads tonight. The corridors of power are echoing with whispers of resignation, rebellion, and royal discontent. The Supreme Court's judgment may have ended one man's political ambitions, but it has opened a deeper reckoning within the very heart of the nation's democracy. The system is bleeding, the walls of government are trembling, and the story of Keir Starmer's downfall has become something far greater than a scandal. It's a warning, a mirror reflecting a nation at war with its own principles. The silence from number 10 isn't calm, it's the calm before the storm. Because as history has shown time and time again, when the law strikes the powerful, the aftermath is never clean. It's messy. It's raw. And this time, it might just change Britain forever.